One of my favorite investigative reporters that we have on the show quite frequently is my guest on the podcast today. He's also a best-selling author, including Fallout and Control Oligarchs, and his name is Seamus Bruner. And you all know and love him from the TV show, so he's going to join us on the podcast in just a minute. Welcome back, everybody. As promised, someone who a lot of you probably know from the TV show, someone who has such a wealth of knowledge on so many different things that the American people have been particularly interested in the last 4 years, but enduring even before that and after that. Seamus Bruner, thank you so much for being here, Seamus. Great to see you.
Hey, Amanda, it's great to see you too.
All right. So DOGE, I consistently hear that according to the legacy media, Americans are scared because it seems like Elon Musk is running the government and he's an unelected bureaucrat, which all of a sudden they have an issue with unelected bureaucrats. They never had an issue with it when it was people like, I don't know, Anthony Fauci. But now all of a sudden there is a concern because Elon Musk, you know, he's outside of government, which we know that they are opposed to anyone who's not an insider. But what do you think is the root of their anger and their frustration and fear over this?
Well, he's disrupting things, and for the establishment class, especially on the left, they don't want their gravy train disrupted. It's obvious from what the things that DOGE has uncovered and put a stop to with all of this runaway spending, billions and billions, possibly trillions of dollars, have been most taxpayers would consider wasted. But from the left's perspective, the establishment especially, and this is where all the media mouthpieces get their talking points, this disruption is not wasteful spending. This is how they make their money. They have all sorts of NGOs and nonprofits that they funnel government grant money into. That we see that with USAID. I mean, there's just this network of huge NGOs where their sole donor is the U.S. government. And so we taxpayers consider that wasteful spending, but for the government party, that is everything. And so that is why they are so upset. They do not want their gravy train disrupted. They want to keep getting paid millions and millions of dollars every year to do nothing, or at least to advance the left-wing agenda. And, that Elon deserves a lot of credit. DOGE deserves a lot of credit for exposing all of this.
Yeah. You brought up USAID, so I want to zoom in on that for a moment, because I remember the first time that I really started paying attention to politics, because my background is music. So for the longest time, I only very surface level paid attention to politics. But I remember the first time that I really zoomed in on corruption and how elite capture happens and how, quid pro quos and pay to play type operations get exacted. And it was with the Clinton Foundation, and it was with Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State, and the speaking fees that Bill Clinton was, these exorbitant speaking fees that he was getting to speak around the globe. And I remember thinking, well, that sounds super shady. And the only reason I bring that up is because what it seems like with USAID is that this seems like a really nice way for a lot of people to make a lot of money greasing the palms of people who they have promised projects to, or, there are frankly a lot of different options as far as using USAID as kind of a money laundering operation. But honestly, Seamus, that's what it seems like it is at this point.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and that's sort of the surface level and the most glaring and obvious and outrageous and frustrating aspect of USAID. And yeah, the Clinton Foundation, I mean, the USAID, it's under the State Department. And when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, we did a book, Clinton Cash, Peter Schweizer's book, Clinton Cash. And so we followed the money from the Clinton Foundation donors to the State Department under Hillary Clinton policies, and USAID just kept popping up, and you would have all these photo ops, and all these donors to the Clinton Foundation would be standing there with USAID branding behind them. And so in Africa, all over the world, but especially in more impoverished countries, people thought USAID for the longest time was it's all about humanitarian aid, and it's bringing in food, and it's putting
it's called USAID.
Yeah, I know it's beautiful branding, very intelligent whoever came up with that, but it's feeding orphans, and it's, doing all kinds of great stuff, just like the Clinton Foundation. And so when you see actually that it worked in concert with the Clinton Foundation, and that Hillary Clinton's State Department was directing USAID resources to allies of the Clintons, that was when the scales fell from my eyes, and I realized, wait a second, this is really at a minimum sort of a grifter or a pay-to-play type operation. But then the deeper and darker and more nefarious purposes of USAID are starting to come to light. It's funding all of these media operations. It's spreading propaganda. And so that's not so much grifter as it is insidious propaganda for the regime. And then beneath that, there's all of course, money laundering. But what is that going in funding? That's a lot of possible black budget stuff, CIA related, regime change, color revolution type activities. You see that it works in concert with the Soros network and the Rockefeller network, which are really all about overturning and creating chaos to create financial opportunities for themselves. And so, yeah, it's a wonderful thing that USAID has been, even just the tip of the iceberg has been exposed.
Yeah. And I love it. And I honestly think the American people love it. For all of the legacy media out there that is, raising a 5-alarm fire, it doesn't seem to match up with how the American people are feeling, because the American people are seeing these ridiculous programs and ridiculous incentives and ridiculous number of digits behind dollar signs that are going to other countries. And I just don't think that they are cool with that. And they would love to see it clawed back. Before we move on to some of the more DOGE related stuff, I want to ask you, for any of the good programs, I'm sure there's something salvageable from USAID. I'm sure there are some programs that are actually outward facing in a beneficial way to all involved, to us and to the countries that they are helping. And I think that is probably a very small portion. So that said, couldn't that just be folded into the State Department? Does it really need to be its own entity?
No, it doesn't need to be its own entity. Of course, yes, it can. If it is, it's going to be. That's the plan. Is it will be folded back into the State Department. It will be more streamlined and in line with the agency. It doesn't need its own building or its own, separate agency. And this just kind of gets to a broader thing, is our government has grown so out of control that when I ask most people, how many government agencies in the sub-agencies do you think that there are? Most people answer, I don't know, maybe 100. There's a dozen plus cabinet agencies. No, the true answer is nobody knows. And I've tried asking, and I've done a bunch of searching. I mean, the real answer is somewhere between 400 and 600 agencies, and possibly more than that. And so you really can't quantify how many agencies are. That's a problem. That seems like an obvious problem. All kinds of sub-agencies and agencies need to be folded back into the main department, cut back significantly. And that's what I see DOGE doing, which is a great thing.
Yeah. I think that there are reasons for that. Number one is there are so many power hungry people in Washington, D.C. They would prefer to break off and form their own agencies so that they can be the head of it. Because I think people here are just so incredibly thirsty for an elitist sounding title. But to me, one of the biggest issues of those 400 to 600 agencies and sub-agencies is the amount of redundancy. So many of USAID and State Department, perfect example of how this can be folded into one agency. You can cut down on the workforce. You can save the American people taxpayer money, and the oversight would be easier because just the sheer volume of it, it would not be as monumental. I want to move on to some of the other things that Elon Musk is uncovering, because I hear a lot of narrative from the left that, oh, this is unconstitutional. He can't just strip away these programs without congressional approval. That's not true. A lot of these programs, the funding to the trans opera in Colombia or wherever it was, and all of these ridiculous things, they didn't have congressional approval to institute these programs, so you don't need congressional approval to strip it away. So for every line item that Elon Musk is crossing through, that ultimately plays into what Congress is trying to do, which is, in order to revive the economy and bring down inflation, to cut spending. And this is one of the best ways to do that.
Yeah, that's right. It's actually a government mandate. It's a Supreme Court mandate. It happened just last year. It kind of flew beneath the radar for a lot of people. But last year there was a Supreme Court case and a decision that came down that overturned 40 years of preference going back to the 1980s. It was called the Chevron deference, and essentially what it said, and essentially what the previous opinion said was that government agencies can give themselves all sorts of powers and programs and policies and personnel that Congress had not given them the authority to do. It was sort of within the agency's ability to just create out of thin air programs and policies. Well, last year, the Supreme Court overturned that, said that is not the case. And so now they have to be specifically authorized by Congress. Now, if Congress, this is where DOGE and Elon Musk will run into trouble, but they've been stacking up court wins, is if Congress has appropriated and specifically mandated a particular program, you can't cut that without Congress unmandating it and overturning it. But there's all kinds of spending. That's not the case with so much of this. That's exactly right. There's so much, I mean, trillions probably, but at least tens and hundreds of billions of money that has just sort of been left up to the agencies to decide how they should spend it. And that can absolutely be cut because Donald Trump runs the executive branch, and that's where all of these agencies fall under.
Welcome back, everybody, and welcome back to you, Seamus. I want to finish up with something that you are so intimately familiar with, the Biden crime family. We've had you on the TV show, gosh, probably dozens of times to talk about this because your knowledge is just so vast on this. We started the Biden presidency with a laptop that Joe Biden and many of his friends, including the 51 intelligence, quote unquote, officials, said was not real, that it was Russian propaganda, Russian misinformation, whatever they want to characterize it as. And we ended with Joe Biden pardoning his son Hunter for many of the things that were that are on that computer.
Yeah, he didn't just pardon Hunter, he pardoned his whole family. Yep. We called them the Biden Five. They were all up to their eyeballs in Biden family corruption. They were the bag men and women of sorts for the Biden family. I mean, we could spend show after show. We've done many before, but really what the point of the pardon is there was several cases against Hunter. There was the gun charge, there was the tax charges. He had pled guilty to some of those. Those all led, well, the gun charge did not lead directly to Joe. That was just a really foolish error on Hunter's part. But the tax charges specifically did lead to Joe. They were the money trail for where all this money came from. Hunter wasn't paying taxes on it. By pardoning Hunter and then the rest of the brothers and everyone else, Joe basically pardoned himself because now you can't go after those money trails. Those guys have been pardoned. And so that was a really slick move that he did there. It's never been done before, especially this weird blanket pardon that he pulled off where it pardoned a whole, it covered an entire a decade of time with an infinite number of possible crimes. That is a huge scandal. And so people ask me all the time, are they ever going to go to jail? It's sad to say probably unlikely. They won't face justice. The pardon power is absolute. However, they will go down in history as the most corrupt first family ever to occupy the White House. And so that is a form of justice. A Biden person with the last name Biden probably won't be able to get elected ever. It's unfortunate for the innocent children who had no part in this. But yeah, the family's totally tainted.
Could there be state charges? I mean, he's pardoned on federal stuff. Is there anything
there could be state
on a
charges.
State basis? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. There could be state charges. The statute of limitations on most crimes, other than rape and murder and horrific things, is typically around 5 years. And so the clock is ticking for state AGs to get with the program. And the state where all their businesses were incorporated, Delaware, is coincidentally and conveniently Joe Biden's home turf. So, you'd have to have maybe a state like Florida where they own some properties. But many of the properties, the beach house and all of that stuff that was bought cash right around the time that the China money was flowing in, that's all in Delaware. So you'd have to have non-Biden connected people, which is asking a lot.
It's funny you bring up Delaware, and I've always thought this about the Biden family. As of at least 20 years ago, and maybe this has changed, but I remember my parents, for insurance companies where, we had policies, they would always talk about how they have to send out these shareholder emails and invite you to vote. And at the time, obviously, there was no at that time, there was no internet, so you couldn't do it digitally. And I remember my parents always talking about how it always took place in Delaware. And it's because at the time, Delaware was the state that was the easiest to start a business. And I've always wondered if that had something to do with why the Bidens decided to start all of these shady business associations there in Delaware. All right, before I let you go, this
Yeah, well, and I'll just say, Delaware is an extremely corporate friendly state. It's because case law over 200 years actually has been very favorable to corporations, and over again the cases affirm that you can't pierce the corporate veil. For example, it's basically a little tax haven in the U.S., and that is why Joe Biden became a very powerful senator, then vice president, then president. Is that state is a powerful state.
I love that. I love bringing it back to that. Okay, before I let you go, this administration seems to be, the theme seems to be clawing back. All of the damage that was done under the Biden administration, we're not just sweeping it under the rug and letting bygones be bygones. We've got this $40 million that went to New York for hotel rooms for illegal migrants. That got clawed back to the American people. That was taxpayer dollars. When it comes to the Bidens and what Jamie Comer and others are, well, I guess now it's really mainly just down to Jamie Comer. On Oversight Committee, they are still going to be investigating what should be the final play for them as far as what to reveal to the American people. Is it even worth it at this point?
Yeah, I think it's important. The smoking gun on Joe Biden, the impeachable offense was the quid pro quo in Ukraine. You had him on video. He admitted to it. That's bribery. He basically admitted to bribery on tape. And so bribery is a specifically listed impeachable offense. It doesn't matter that the money didn't make it to Joe. It did, of course, but it doesn't matter that you can't prove the money made it to Joe, because bribery includes bribing family members. Hunter was the family member. The thing of value was you're not getting the $1 billion unless you fire the prosecutor. So there's a couple quid pro quos there. Anyway, so the smoking gun has been done. The Bidens are totally, disreputable and scandalized forever. But it is important to show how Joe benefited, and so in how he got money, and that may not materialize for a little while, but things like paying all cash for a beach house right at the time that your son's getting millions of dollars from China. Where did you get the cash, Joe? He claims it was a book deal, but the book deals, I know how book deals work. They don't give you all of the money in one big lump sum payment. Typically, they space it out to make sure that the sales come through. And anyway, so proving that Joe got paid, we found over $100,000 of bills that Hunter paid for him. That's not nothing. And so I think Joe getting the money really puts a nice tidy bow on the most corrupt political family, tied with the Clintons maybe, but the Clintons didn't sell out to China in the same way the Bidens did. So really, we can say the most corrupt political family in history.
Yeah. So even with the federal pardon, considering there could be state charges on the table out of states like Florida, it seems to me you're saying that the American people should not let bygones be bygones.
No. I think every option should be on the table that is available. I just wouldn't tell anybody to hold their breath for the Bidens going to jail. Right. Many of these big crimes are federal crimes. The blanket pardons cover most of the family members. Unless. And I know that a lot of Republicans, they don't want to be seen as is doing what the Democrats do and going after political opponents. I would say this is not that. You have to enforce the law. If you want to eliminate the two-tier justice system, you must enforce the law, and people who break it need to be held accountable. But I just sense that a lot from the Republicans, is that, we don't want to be the lawfare party. And it's like, it's not lawfare if you're enforcing the law. So I would encourage the Republicans to enforce the law. It's the only way you can restore justice in this country.
Yeah. And I would argue that the Bidens, I think, are already receiving a little bit of comeuppance, because they've pretty much been shunned by the Democrat Party. They realized obviously before the election that it was no longer a viable option to send him to the American people to make the choice between Biden and Trump. So they replaced him. And Hunter Biden. I don't know what circles he's running in these days, but I imagine they aren't as powerful as they once were. So, and that is due in large part to people like you, Seamus, all of the uncovering and investigating that you've done. Tell everybody where they can find you on X and your books and everywhere that they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, you can go to myname.com, SeamusBruner.com. It's SeamusBruner. And I'm on X at Seamus Bruner. No numbers,
Perfect.
No characters. Thank you, Amanda.
Absolutely. In fact, I have your book sitting right over here. So everybody go check out his books and find him on social media. A lot of great information there. Seamus, it's been an honor. Thanks so much for being here, and we'll have you back on again soon.
All right. Thanks, Amanda.
Take care.